Hello, my name is David. I moved to Paris from France with the hope of improving my English and experiencing life in this vibrant city. As I settled into my new life, I found that learning English was just one part of my journey. The city itself was a character in my story, full of charm, history, and endless opportunities for discovery. Every street I walked down held a promise of new experiences, and I was determined to embrace them all. After returning from my trip to London, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The sights and sounds of the city lingered in my mind, inspiring me to explore even more. I began planning weekend outings to different neighborhoods in Paris. I wanted to immerse myself in the culture and practice my English along the way. One Saturday, I decided to visit Le Marais, a historic district known for its art galleries, boutiques, and Café Tilde copyright S. I wandered through the narrow streets, admiring the beautiful architecture and vibrant atmosphere. As I strolled, I spotted a small gallery showcasing local artists. Curious, I stepped inside. The owner, a friendly woman named Claire, greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome. Are you interested in art?" she asked in English. I hesitated for a moment, then replied, "Yes. I love art. I want to learn more." Claire seemed pleased with my answer and began explaining the pieces on display. I listened intently, trying to absorb her words. It was a great opportunity to practice my listening skills. After our conversation, I thanked her and left the gallery, feeling accomplished. I had managed to engage in a meaningful conversation and learned about local artists. This encounter inspired me to seek out more similar experiences. The following weekend, I visited a local market, Marché Tilde copyright Bastille, which was bustling with vendors selling fresh produce, flowers, and artisanal goods. As I walked through the stalls, I struck up a conversation with a vendor selling handmade soaps. "These look amazing. What are they made of?" I asked, eager to practice my English. The vendor, a cheerful woman named Sophie, launched into an explanation about the ingredients. I felt my confidence grow with each question I asked. We chatted for a while about her craft and the benefits of natural products. Before I left, I bought a bar of lavender soap as a small souvenir from our conversation. Experiences like these became the foundation of my language learning. Every interaction reinforced my belief that speaking English was not just about memorizing vocabulary or grammar rules. It was about connecting with people, sharing stories, and building relationships. In class, Julian continued to encourage us to participate actively. One day, he introduced a fun game where we had to describe objects in the classroom without using their names. It was a challenging but effective exercise that forced us to think creatively and use the vocabulary we had learned. Laughter filled the room as we tried to guess each other's clues. I enjoyed the sense of camaraderie it fostered among us. As the weeks passed, I noticed my fluency improving. I began to think in English rather than translating from French, which was a significant breakthrough for me. However, I still faced challenges, especially with pronunciation. Some sounds were difficult for me to master, and I often felt self-conscious about my accent. To address this, I sought additional resources. I discovered online pronunciation courses and began practicing daily. I would listen to native speakers and mimic their sounds, focusing on the rhythm and intonation of their speech. This practice was time-consuming but rewarding. I could feel my pronunciation improving gradually. One evening, while attending a language exchange event, I met a woman named Mia, a native English speaker from Australia. She was friendly and approachable, and we quickly struck up a conversation. As we spoke, I felt comfortable enough to ask her for feedback on my pronunciation. To my relief, she offered valuable tips and even recommended some podcasts to help me further develop my skills. "Just remember," she said with a smile, "everyone makes mistakes. Don't be afraid to sound silly. It's all part of the learning process." Her encouragement motivated me to keep pushing through my insecurities. Mia and I became friends, often meeting up for coffee and conversation. We would switch between English and French, helping each other with our language skills. I learned about Australian culture through her stories, and she loved hearing about my experiences in France. One day, as we sat in a café tilde copyright I shared my dream of becoming fluent in English and traveling to English-speaking countries. "What's your ultimate goal?" Mia asked, her curiosity piqued. I thought for a moment and replied, "I want to work in an international environment where I can use my language skills every day." "That sounds amazing." "You know, I have a friend who works at a tech company in London. They're always looking for bilingual candidates," Mia said, her eyes lighting up. We discussed the possibility of me applying for a position there. The idea excited me, but it also filled me with apprehension. Could I really make such a big move? As the conversation flowed, I realized that taking risks was part of growth. I made a note to reach out to Mia's friend for more information. The thought of pursuing a new opportunity was both daunting and exhilarating. Back in class, Julian introduced a new project. We had to create a video presentation on a topic of our choice. I chose to speak about the impact of technology on communication. It was a subject I was passionate about, and I wanted to share my thoughts in English. The assignment required research, scripting, and rehearsing, which I dove into with enthusiasm. I spent hours researching, gathering statistics, and crafting my presentation. I wanted to ensure my message was clear and engaging. When it was time to present, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Standing in front of my classmates, I focused on speaking clearly and confidently. As I spoke, I could see my classmates nodding and engaged in the topic. Their reactions fueled my confidence. After I finished, Julian praised my effort and highlighted how much I had improved. Hearing positive feedback from him and my classmates felt incredibly rewarding. Inspired by my presentation, I decided to explore the world of public speaking further. I learned about local clubs that focused on improving speaking skills, such as Toastmasters. I attended a few meetings and was amazed by the supportive environment. Members of all backgrounds shared their stories, providing constructive feedback to one another. At one meeting, I was invited to give an impromptu speech. My heart raced as I stood in front of the group, but I reminded myself of Mia's words, "Don't be afraid to sound silly." I took a deep breath and began sharing a funny story about my experiences in Paris. The laughter from the audience seized my nerves, and I felt a surge of confidence. With each meeting, I grew more comfortable speaking in public. The combination of Toastmasters and my English classes helped me refine my skills and become more articulate. I was no longer just learning English, I was using it as a tool for self-expression and connection. As summer approached, I felt a longing to explore more of France. I had only scratched the surface of what the country had to offer. One weekend, I decided to visit Lyon, known for its rich culinary scene and stunning architecture. I was eager to practice my English while immersing myself in a new culture. Upon arriving in Lyon, I wandered through the old town, marveling at the Renaissance architecture. I stopped at a local café copyright for lunch and struck up a conversation with the owner, Pierre. He was passionate about his food and began describing the traditional dishes of Lyon. I listened attentively, trying to absorb every detail. Our conversation turned to travel, and I shared my experiences in Paris and my aspirations to explore more of France. Pierre encouraged me to try local specialties, and I ended up enjoying a delicious plate of coq au vin. The flavors were incredible, and I savored every bite while chatting with Pierre. Later, I explored a nearby market and discovered a stall selling artisanal cheeses. I couldn't resist trying a few samples. The vendor, a jovial man named Jacques, shared stories about each cheese and its origins. I found myself laughing and enjoying the conversation as much as the food. My time in Lyon was a reminder of how food could bring people together. Sharing meals with locals not only expanded my culinary knowledge but also allowed me to practice my English in a relaxed setting. I returned to Paris with a newfound appreciation for the culture and language. Back in the city, my friendship with Mia deepened. We often explored Paris together, visiting museums, parks, and hidden gems. One afternoon, we decided to take a walk along the Seine, where we stumbled upon a book fair. Stalls lined the riverbank, filled with second-hand books and local authors' works. We spent hours browsing the books, chatting with vendors, and sharing our favorite reads. I found a novel by an author I admired, and Mia encouraged me to read it in English. "You'll learn so much from it," she said enthusiastically. I purchased the book, excited to dive into it later. As the days turned into weeks, I felt a sense of belonging in Paris. I had formed connections with locals and fellow learners, and my English had improved significantly. I even found myself dreaming in English, a milestone that made me smile. One evening, as I prepared for a language exchange meeting, I reflected on how far I had come. I thought back to that day by the Seine when I had spoken with the man on the bench, and how that single conversation had sparked my journey. I had transformed from a timid beginner into someone who could engage in meaningful discussions. During the meeting, I met new faces and shared stories with them. I was no longer the quiet participant but an active contributor to the conversations. One person, a student from Brazil named Lucas, shared his experiences learning English. We bonded over our challenges and victories, exchanging tips and encouragement. "Learning a language is like climbing a mountain," Lucas said thoughtfully. "There are tough spots, but the view from the top is worth it." His analogy resonated with me, and I realized that we were all on this journey together, each with our unique struggles and triumphs. In the following weeks, I continued to push my boundaries. I attended a workshop on storytelling, where participants learned to craft and share personal narratives. I was excited but nervous about sharing my story in front of others. The facilitator encouraged us to tap into our emotions and experiences, making our stories relatable and engaging. When it was my turn to share, I spoke about my journey to Paris and the challenges I faced while learning English. I talked about my fears, my successes, and the friendships I had built. As I shared my story, I could see the audience connecting with my words. Their nods and smiles gave me the confidence to continue. After the workshop, several attendees approached me, sharing their own stories and expressing admiration for my courage. It was a powerful reminder that vulnerability fosters connection. I left feeling inspired and eager to continue sharing my experiences with others. With summer in full swing, I decided to take advantage of the warm weather by organizing a picnic in one of Paris's beautiful parks, Jardin des Tuileries. I invited my classmates and friends, hoping to create a relaxed atmosphere for conversation and connection. On the day of the picnic, the sun shone brightly, and laughter filled the air as everyone gathered. We shared homemade dishes, snacks, and drinks, each person contributing something unique. As we ate, I felt a sense of joy and belonging wash over me. After the meal, we played games and shared stories, practicing our language skills in a fun, informal setting. I watched as friendships blossomed, and everyone enjoyed the vibrant energy of the day. At that moment, I realized that this was the beauty of language learning, and not just the words we spoke but the connections we forged through shared experiences. As the summer continued, I began to contemplate my future. The idea of applying for a job in London lingered in my mind. I reached out to Mia's friend, who kindly offered to review my copyright copyright and give me insights into the company culture. I was grateful for her support, but the thought of putting myself out there filled me with anxiety. One evening, while chatting with Mia over coffee, I expressed my fears about applying for the position. What if they don't want me? What if my English isn't good enough? I confided, my voice tinged with uncertainty. Mia listened intently and then responded, "David, you've come so far. Remember all the times you thought you wouldn't be able to do something, yet you did. Trust yourself." Her words resonated deeply. I had faced numerous challenges and emerged stronger each time. With renewed determination, I sat down to update my copyright and draft a cover letter. I highlighted my language skills, international experience, and passion for learning. After submitting my application, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. The waiting game began, and I tried to distract myself with other activities. I continued attending language exchange meetings, honing my English skills, and immersing myself in the culture of Paris. Weeks passed, and just as I was starting to feel anxious about my application, I received an email inviting me for an interview. My heart raced with anticipation. This was my chance to showcase my skills and passion. I spent days preparing, practicing common interview questions with Mia and refining my responses. The day of the interview arrived, and I donned my best outfit, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. I took the metro to the company's office, rehearsing my answers in my mind. When I arrived, the atmosphere was buzzing with energy. I was greeted by the receptionist, who directed me to a conference room where the interview would take place. As I entered the room, I was met by two interviewers, both smiling warmly. They introduced themselves and made me feel at ease. The interview began, and I felt surprisingly calm as I spoke about my experiences, aspirations, and what I could bring to the team. To my relief, the interviewers were supportive and encouraging. They asked thoughtful questions and engaged in a discussion about my background. I could feel my confidence growing as I shared my journey and passion for language and culture. After what felt like a productive conversation, the interview came to an end. I thanked them for the opportunity and left the office feeling accomplished. Regardless of the outcome, I knew I had given it my best shot. The following days were filled with anticipation, and I kept reminding myself that I had already achieved so much by simply applying. Finally, the moment arrived. I received an email offering me the position. I couldn't believe it. I was overjoyed and immediately called Mia to share the news. "I did it. I got the job," I exclaimed, my heart racing with excitement. Mia cheered on the other end, and we celebrated together. I felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond just getting a job. It was a testament to my growth, resilience, and determination. As I prepared for this new chapter, I reflected on my journey thus far. I had transformed from someone unsure of my abilities into a confident individual ready to take on new challenges. The friendships I had formed, the experiences I had shared, and the language I had learned were all integral to my story. In the weeks leading up to my move to London, I continued to immerse myself in Paris. I visited favorite spots, enjoyed meals with friends, and explored new neighborhoods. I wanted to cherish every moment in the city that had become my second home. One evening, as I sat by the Seine with Mia, watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. "Thank you for being such a wonderful friend," I said, turning to her. "I wouldn't have come this far without your support." Mia smiled, her eyes shining. "You've done all the hard work, David. I'm proud of you. Just remember, this is only the beginning of your adventure." With her words echoing in my mind, I embraced the unknown future with excitement. I was ready to take on new challenges in London, confident in the skills I had developed and the friendships I had built. As I closed this chapter of my life, I knew that it was merely a stepping stone to even greater adventures. With my heart full of hope and determination, I prepared to embark on the next part of my journey, one where I would continue to learn, grow, and embrace the beautiful connections that language and culture could bring. As I settled into life in London, I quickly learned that the city was a melting pot of cultures, much like Paris. I was excited to explore my new environment while continuing to improve my English skills. I enrolled in a language school to keep my learning structured and to meet new people. On my first day at the school, I met classmates from various countries, each with their own unique stories and experiences. We bonded over our shared struggles in mastering English and our aspirations for the future. One student, Aisha from Egypt, stood out to me. She was passionate about writing and often shared her poetry in our discussions. I admired her ability to express herself so eloquently in a second language. After class, I approached her. "I love how you express your thoughts in English. It's inspiring," I said, genuinely impressed. Aisha smiled, her eyes lighting up. "Thank you. I often write poetry in Arabic, and translating it into English is challenging but rewarding." We quickly became friends, sharing tips on writing and language. Our discussions sparked new ideas and encouraged me to explore my own creativity. I began to experiment with writing short stories in English, using my experiences in Paris and my journey as inspiration. As I settled into my new routine, I also sought opportunities to engage with the local community. I volunteered at a nearby community center, helping with language classes for immigrants. This experience was eye-opening. I saw firsthand the challenges others faced in adapting to a new country. It reminded me of my own journey, and I felt a strong sense of connection to those I was helping. Through volunteering, I met people from all walks of life, via families seeking a better future, students eager to learn, and individuals who shared their stories of resilience. I realized that language learning was not just about grammar and vocabulary, it was about building bridges between cultures and fostering understanding. One evening, as I was preparing for a class at the community center, I met a woman named Fatima. She was new to London and struggling to navigate her new surroundings. We struck up a conversation, and I offered to help her practice her English. Fatima's eyes lit up with gratitude. "I want to learn so I can find a job and support my family," she said, her determination evident. We began meeting regularly, and I helped her with conversational skills and interview preparation. Fatima's dedication inspired me, and I often found myself learning from her resilience. She would share stories about her family and her hopes for the future, and I admired her strength in facing the challenges of starting anew. As the months passed, I felt more settled in London. My English improved significantly, and I gained confidence in speaking and writing. I continued to explore the city, visiting museums, parks, and historical sites. Each outing was an opportunity to practice my language skills and learn about British culture. I also reconnected with Mia during a trip she made to London. We explored the city together, visiting iconic landmarks like the Tower of London and Buckingham Palace. It was heartwarming to share these experiences with her, reflecting on how much we had both grown since we first met in Paris. "Look at us, David. We're exploring a whole new city," Mia exclaimed, her excitement contagious. "And you're doing so well with your English." Her words encouraged me to appreciate the progress I had made. As my job in London began, I quickly adapted to the new work environment. My colleagues were supportive, and I felt valued for my contributions. The experience of working in an international team provided me with new perspectives and insights, and I thrived in the dynamic atmosphere. However, I also faced challenges at work. Occasionally, I found myself struggling to understand idiomatic expressions or cultural references in conversations. It was frustrating at times, but I reminded myself that learning was a continuous process. I sought feedback from my colleagues and asked questions whenever I felt lost. Their willingness to help reassured me that I was on the right path. One day, during a team meeting, I decided to share a project I had been working on. As I presented my ideas, I felt a wave of nerves wash over me. But as I spoke, I could see my colleagues engaged and interested. Their positive reactions encouraged me to continue, and by the end of the presentation, I received constructive feedback that further fueled my growth. In the evenings, I often attended cultural events and workshops. I explored the local art scene, visiting galleries and attending performances. I was fascinated by the diversity of expression in London and how it reflected the city's multicultural identity. Through these experiences, I continued to practice my language skills, engaging with artists and fellow attendees in discussions about their work. One memorable evening, I attended a spoken word event at a local cafe. Copyright poets shared their stories, weaving narratives that resonated deeply with the audience. I was captivated by their use of language and how they conveyed complex emotions. Inspired, I decided to share my own story in English at an open mic night. Preparing for the event was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. I wrote a piece about my journey and my fears, hopes, and the power of language in connecting people. When it was my turn to speak, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. As I began to read, I could see the audience listening attentively, and I drew strength from their presence. Sharing my story was cathartic. I spoke about my experiences in Paris, my struggles with language, and the friendships that had shaped my journey. As I finished, the audience erupted in applause, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. It was a moment of vulnerability and connection that reminded me of the power of storytelling. In the months that followed, I continued to build a life in London, one filled with growth, creativity, and meaningful connections. My friendships with Aisha and Fatima flourished, and I cherished the moments we shared. We often met for coffee, exchanging stories about our lives and supporting each other in our language journeys. Looking back on my experiences, I realized how far I had come. From my early days in Paris, grappling with the challenges of learning a new language, to my current life in London, where I felt confident and empowered. I had transformed. The connections I had built, the stories I had shared, and the lessons I had learned were all part of my evolving narrative. As I sat in a cafe copyright one afternoon, sipping my coffee and reflecting on my journey, I felt a sense of fulfillment. I had faced my fears, embraced challenges, and forged connections that transcended language barriers. I was grateful for the experiences that had shaped me and excited for the adventures that lay ahead. And so, as I continued to navigate this vibrant city, I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that every step of the journey was an opportunity for growth and connection.